Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturient Society.
Welcome back, everybody, to your favorite writing podcast. Over there is your host, Karissa, aka Catherine, aka Lewis, and her teeth. I just realized how nice they are. I just never noticed
Really?
You have beautiful teeth. Like the ratio of teeth to like lips that show when you smile is like perfect. I'm very jealous.
That is crazy because I was literally just looking in the mirror and saying, why are my lips so thin? Like I put lipstick on and I'm like, this looks fine. And then I get on camera and I'm like, where are my lips? I look like, I don't even look like a human. I look like a facsimile of a human that doesn't have any lips. I don't know. So apparently that's just me.
I can tell you a trick if you feel that way. First of all, I'm Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien, and welcome to the pod. But this is what I learned because I used to be like obsessed with makeup. Gloss and lighter colors make your lips look bigger. Darker colors and or matte shades make your lips look thinner. So my lips are really dry right now. So they're basically matte. So they look smaller than they are because I have big old lips and giant gums, which is why I'm very jealous of people with the exact like tooth to lip ratio you have. I'm like, that right there is a nice smile. I smile and it's like more gums than teeth, like by far. It's
but it's like it's a pure smile.
Is it pure?
Yeah.
Thank you. You made me feel better.
Yeah. It's like you're so happy that you're like showing gums. I don't know. But it's a good thing. Yeah.
I look like a rabid badger.
Or that.
Just too
you can
much,
do both.
Too much shows. But here, I'm going to show off my nails. Look, they've got bats on them. And this one has got like a spider web with a little like glitter thing in, which is not my favorite, but the bats part is nice.
That's cool. You like, I don't know if it was accidental or not, but we both kind of went accidentally dark/Halloween.
We did.
I was wearing black and
I picked it because I went outside this morning to water the garden before work, and it was second day it was cold, but this was like the second day. I mean, the first day it was so cold that I would have been like really chilly if I hadn't been wearing a long sleeve, which was really nice. So I was out there like, ooh, it's still kind of chilly in my sweater. So I've been wearing my like dark, soft sweater all day. Cool. I should have gone for like a dark lip color, and then we would have been like,
matched.
Really matchy.
See, maybe part of the problem. Yeah, eventually. Part of the problem is probably that I very rarely wear lipstick. This is a relatively new thing in my life. And so it's my lips are usually the same shade as my face. So maybe they do look bigger. And so now they look smaller because I have a darker color on. Who knows?
It's possible. I don't know. I also want to say this is makeup corner, you guys. This is lipstick corner of the Scripturient Society. I feel like we hit this every few episodes. Yeah. But what was I going to say? Oh, yes. I don't feel like I can pull off purple lipsticks. And I've never tried it. So I could literally just try it to find out. But I feel like you can pull it off because you either have to be really, really tan or really, really pale. And you're very, very pale. So the purple looks really nice. It looks like ethereal. I feel like if I were to put purple on, it would look like a child like playing with their parents' lipstick. Because I don't have the right complexion for purple is how I feel. Yeah. I don't know. Because sometimes I put on stuff that's too pink and I'm like, absolutely not. I need a bright red.
Yeah, I was trying for a lighter purple with this one. I thought it was going to be lighter, and I like this shade, but I don't know. Nice. I like the light. I like purple in general. So honestly, even if I looked bad, I would probably wear it anyway. So
yeah, you really got a win with going to GC with the color being purple. Purple is one of my least favorite colors and always has been. Not like on people, I don't care, but like as like if I was gonna pick a color to surround myself with, I would never pick purple. And everything in GC was purple. And then it turns out the like one of the schools in our town, like their school colors are purple, and it's like the same color purple as GCU purple. And I'm like, I can't get away.
Why
is everything purple?
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. I'm not a big fan of the color red, and the college or the university in the town I grew up in is blue and red as their colors. And so everyone always wears red, and I'm like, I want blue, but it's navy blue. So it's like not as much a color as red. So it's navy like I'm kind of between
monochrome.
Yeah, I'm like I love color, but I hate red, so I have no option. The only other color is white, and it's like so okay.
You either wear black or you wear like fluorescence, and that's always surprised me, just because I've never known anyone who likes fluorescence so much.
I do. I like bright colors. Again,
like
not sure that I look good in them, but I like them enough that I don't care.
You know, what it comes down to is you always tend to look best in whatever you like yourself in the most. True. Because you're happiest. And that's when you like look best. It's like true. My gums. Apparently when my gums show, it's a good look for me because I'm happy.
Exactly.
So now when I do my weird fake smile, because I can't do like, this is my thing. I would be like, when I did acting a lot, drama was pretty easy, right? Like the dramatic scenes and the sad scenes, so much easier. Comedy's the real trick, because to smile and laugh on cue is very hard because it almost always looks fake. And I'm very, very bad at it. I'd be like, and that was like the best I could do for like a fake laugh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm pretty good at fake smiling and laughing because I don't read social cues. Well, I don't read social cues very well. So I just read the room, and my whole life I'm just like, I don't know if that was funny, but everyone else is laughing, so I'm going to go with it. So
that is so funny.
I think I'm pretty good at that, actually. I'd probably be better at that than the dramatic. I like the way you said it too. The dramatic, which is on theme for the episode that we're doing tomorrow, which I forgot to remind you about, but I assume that you remember. That's right.
Yes. Okay.
I remember now. But
guys, this is an exciting week in celebration of October, because when this comes out, it'll be almost October. And yes, I think it'll be like the day before October or something. And then our sister podcast, That Pretentious Book Club, Karissa's joining us over there for Phantom of the Opera, the book.
Dun, 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 dun.
Exactly.
That's from the musical, not the book.
Yes, exactly. Obviously. I was picturing a lot of stuff in the book as in the musical because I've seen it so much. And I was like, it is time to watch it again. And then I am going to pretend that I am an opera singer for the next week.
That's fair.
I think so too. Javi's never seen me go through, like, pretty much once a year. I typically go through like a Phantom of the Opera week where I'm like, what if I'd become an opera star? I'm like, maybe Christine Daae should be my breakout role. And so I'm like, I bet I can hit that note. And I go through that week once a year, pretty much. Javi's never witnessed it, but unless he happens to like coincidentally be away again, I think he's going to see it this year. So
gosh. That's great. The puppies do not like it when I sing or hum. So they'll bark at me, and maybe they're just trying to join in, I don't know. But sometimes they give me a look like, shut up. So I haven't been singing as much as usual. Like I tend to hum a lot when I'm like just by myself, and I haven't been as much.
Have made you feel self-conscious? That's too funny. Oh my goodness.
But anyway, I always had this like vision that I was a good singer, and apparently the puppies think not. So,
I have gone through, I've thought I was a bad singer, then I thought I was a great singer, then I thought I was a good singer, and now I think I'm like somewhere on the lower average of singing. And I've had just like vastly different opinions from everyone around me as well, all over the spectrum. So I'm going to go back to, if you think you sound good, who cares? You sound good. Unless your goal is to be like the next Lady Gaga. Other than that,
yeah, which is not my goal. So who cares? Not me. Exactly. I sing in the car. That's where I sing, because no one else is usually.
I used to sing in the car a lot. So. We also got a karaoke machine for Javi's birthday, which is exciting. Nice. But I do have to always remember, because with karaoke, I can get like really intense about it. Like if I think about it too much in advance, because I'll be like, I'm going to sing with my most beautiful voice.
Yeah. I'm going to impress everyone.
Exactly. And then I think about it so much that I end up singing and not sounding that great. I can like hear it. I'm like, oh, this is not a good day for me to be doing this. But you know what? Last time I was a little drunk when we did karaoke, and it was great because I just basically shouted into the microphone and danced around. And I was like, you know what? I think this is what karaoke is actually for. Anyways. I don't think this sounds good.
Yep, that's the point. That's the fun of it.
Yeah, so I just pretty much shouted Spice Girls into the microphone while I tried to make people sing with me, which is probably exactly what I've done with you before, and we'll do again.
That sounds familiar. Like, you don't even need karaoke to do that sometimes. So
no, I don't. You're exactly correct. I don't. One of my favorite things to do is to try to pull people into situations they have wholeheartedly told me that they do not want to be involved in. And I'm like, I bet I can change your mind. And with some people, it just doesn't work. Like you're just like, no, it's impossible.
Please leave me alone. I just want to sit here and fantasize about a book.
Yeah, you're like, thank you for your interest in my attention, but I'm going to have to decline. And I'm like, that's not an option. And you're like, it is an option. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this energy.
It's like, thank you for thinking of me, but no.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely not.
Absolutely no.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, how's your week been? Has anything exciting happened?
Not really. The only thing I was going to say is back to our kind of girly topic. I broke a nail this week.
Oh,
And it's like, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed if you're like watching on YouTube or whatever, but I tend to grow my nails out really long. And it has been actual years since I broke a nail. I'm so used to them that I don't break them very often. I think I was in probably high school or maybe early college last time I broke one. So it broke because I was playing fetch with the puppies and they came at me with the toy and it just hit the middle finger like that. And it did not hurt at all.
Did you
it
cry,
was
though?
the craziest thing. No, it is below it is like on the nail bed. And I didn't feel it at all. The only reason I noticed is because the nail bent forward and I could feel it touch the tip of my finger. And I was like, this should hurt, right? Like that should hurt more than it does, but it didn't. And it still doesn't. So I just cut them all down and then I painted over it with some clear gloss so it won't chip or anything. And
wow. And now you're starting from scratch.
Yep. Shockingly unpainful. What is that?
I don't know if you just have like more pain tolerance than me, or if your nails just are stronger than mine.
That might be
it. I that maybe that's it, because I don't know, maybe my nails have gotten weaker because I used to think that they were fairly strong. And now if I don't have something on top of my nails, like something hard, like very minimum, like a gel gloss, or like these are glue-ons, which are my new best friend, because when I trash them around the farm, it's easy to just replace them. And also they're more flexible. So the dip polish that I like to do is a little bit more brittle. So it looks really nice and it goes on top of my real nail, but it protects them, but it's only as long as my nails are, but it like it'll chip and shatter. These are so bendy because they're made out of plastic. That it's very hard to screw them up. So they last a long time for doing farm stuff. So, and now I can't function without them. So I don't know at what point I crossed the line into, I am addicted, but I'm also like a huge weenie, because if I try to take my nails off and like go for 2 days, I just am like, I'm just uber sensitive about my nails. Like anything, like I'll be doing the dishes and something will like scratch the top of my nail and I'm like, oh my God, that was so upsetting. I'm just not.
I am going to lose my mind. No.
I think I'm also just very prone to being overstimulated by a lot of things. So maybe having the nails helps a little bit, because like the touch stimulation on the top of my fingers is so like dulled. I'm not used to it. It's so nice. Because I have a big like touch thing with like overstimulation. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I'm trying to give myself an excuse, like a reason to validate needing fake nails.
I mean, you can just enjoy them. That's a valid reason. I just don't like to cut my nails. And so I wait until it is absolutely necessary to do so.
That is funny. So, I like it. I like that for you.
Thank you. I do too.
Anyway, there's something I was going to ask you about. Oh no, I was going to give a teaser of I read Karissa's short story, you guys, and we'll talk about it more later, I'm sure, in the writing portion of the episode. But last episode she said the ending got surprisingly dark, and I was like, yeah, sure it did. And I knew it would be dark, but for some reason I didn't expect it to go the way that it went, and I was like, what is happening?
It was pretty dark.
It's pretty dark. So maybe she will publish it after the contest is over and you guys can all read it. But it was intense and very, very good.
Yep. I wanted to like build up this sense of dread. Like you can kind of see it coming, but you're like, no, that's not going to happen. So
I did not see it coming at all.
Cool,
and I'm just an innocent.
I don't things
read,
are great.
Like a lot of horror. I mean, I'm like, I bet everything will be fine in the end. I'm a big fan of the happy ending.
It does kind of read like a horror story, doesn't it? I've been kind of leaning into that lately, and it is not on purpose. So
none of this
that's
surprises
interesting.
Me. That's your alter ego. That's Catherine.
And it's coming up on October, which
spooky
the spooky
season. So
season
I've been
does
watching that show You about a stalker.
Yes.
Which I was kind of like a little bit against when it very first came out, because I was like, wait, are we like taking the side of a stalker? And then I was like, hang on, this is fiction and this is interesting. And I think my brain had just been like, I saw some people getting like up in arms about it on Facebook, and I was like, I don't care enough about the genre to like really even explore it. And so I just didn't. And then recently I was like, you know what? It just looks like a really interesting thriller.
I think so. I agree. I watched all 3 seasons. It's 3, right?
I think so. Yeah. And so
And
I'm in season 2 now. And I just think it's a really interesting thriller. I think it's very clear that we're not condoning anything the main character does, but it is interesting.
Well, it's just like this study in, first of all, how someone like that can convince themselves they are the good guy and therefore how it works, but also how good people are not all good and bad people are not all bad. And so you do have to take their actions as opposed to them as a person.
Yeah, I've been really leaning into that theme a lot lately because I feel like it's very important. And like we've lost the idea of nuance in life, which is deeply unfortunate and misleading in many ways. So that, and I finished watching The Devil in Ohio, which I don't know if you've watched it, but I feel like you really, really like it. Dude.
Cool.
You should definitely watch it.
What genre is it? Is it like it's a movie?
Kind of psychological thriller. No, it's a short series on Netflix. And it's kind of like there's this girl who escapes from a cult, and the whole like short series is just kind of like them like trying to like unravel the cult and like figure out stuff about the cult and like save her from the cult or whatever. And it's just really interesting. Yeah, I know. Cool, I thought you would. There's like a lot of like crows and like gray skies.
The murder of crows.
Yes, there is a murder of crows in multiple senses of the word. So you would enjoy it. But that's all of my October energy is coming out now.
Just coming out. Pretty cool.
Yep.
Nice. Is that your update or is there
no here? I'm going to give one more update because I have to give a shout out to my friend Marissa, who I met at earlier when I was talking to my mom. I accidentally said mermaid school. What I mean is the mermaid freedive retreat that I went on.
You mean mermaid school, right? You just don't want to say that out loud.
Yeah, it was mermaid school. It just sounds silly to say it, but I did. It's where I got Patty freedive certified and Patty mermaid certified, which is a certification now, which is awesome. And I met Marissa there, and we hit it off. And she's awesome, and she's a reader, and so like we chat all the time. And Finfolk is this wonderful place that makes these beautiful fabric tails with these gorgeous patterns. There have always been a little bit out of my price range, and or then when they drop back into my price range, I have other stuff I have to take care of, like, the plumbing in my house exploded recently. So I'm like, goodbye all of my extra money. And now we're approaching the holidays. So I'm like, okay, any little bit of extra money is going to be for presents. So there's no more spending money. I bought at TJ Maxx, I bought 2 sets of fake nails because they were only $4. And then I bought 2 very discounted outfits for the fall. So I was like, that's it. That is officially
that's what I get.
That's what I get until basically January because of gift giving season. So it was totally unexpected. Anyway, so we were leaving to go pick up lunch today because I didn't want to cook and I was not in a good mood and I was very hungry. And so Javi was like, I'll just take you to get some junk food, which is like my catharsis. And so on the way out, we were like, what's that box? There was like a box leaning against the gate. And I was like, oh my God, it had like Marissa's name on it. And it was from Finfolk. And I was like, what is a box from Finfolk doing here?
Right.
Like, what? And so I opened it in the car and it was a tail. And I was like, no freaking way. And I was like, this has got to be a mistake because she and I have been like writing letters back and forth. And I was like, maybe she like accidentally put my address or something. And so I texted her, I was like, hey, did you send this to the wrong place? And she's like, nope, it's for you. It's in your size. I got it for you. It's the one that we had talked about because we sent pictures of mermaid tails back and forth. And so I was just floored. I have no idea where it came from, like out of just the goodness of her pure, beautiful heart. And I'm just like so unbelievably thrilled. I thought it was going to be years and years before I actually bought one for myself. So I'm like so psyched. I did lay on my bed for 45 minutes today wearing it and even working on my computer because I tried it on my lunch break and then I was like, I'm not taking it off. And Javi was like,
of course not.
And I was like, could you please bring me my work computer? And so I worked on that with my mermaid tail. And so
this is like such a step up from like during COVID, people were like, I'm just going to go to work remotely in my pajamas and I'm just going to wear sweats. And you're like, I'm just going to sit here in a mermaid tail. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. And so I took some like cute little like boomerangs because I know how to do that now. I'm like finally caught up to like, when did people start doing boomerangs?
Like 2015, I think.
I'm finally caught up to like 2015. And I know how to do boomerangs sometimes. And so I took some boomerangs I'm going to post and I took a little video of my tail and I'm so happy. And so Marissa, thank you. I will also be talking about this on That Pretentious Book Club. I'm sure, I don't know if she listens to this one or not, but the world needs to know that she's a wonderful, beautiful soul. And I'm like, the deepest lake in Texas is only like an hour from here. So if you want to come out here, we could go free. Well, I mean, we could go like swim in our tails anywhere, but we could also go free diving out there. So
cool.
Yeah, so that was that just happened today, but it was an unbelievable shock and excellent because I was very grumpy before because I was
It
hungry.
just made the day better.
It made my day so much better. I was doing the thing where I get hungry, then I get violently ill, then I get too grumpy to eat, and then I get violently ill again from being hungry. And so I was like it's a great cycle. I was literally in the car, like about to throw up because I was so hungry, which is so stupid that my body does that. I'm like, if we were in a survival scenario,
yeah, this is a pointless reaction.
Exactly. I'm like, you need to hang on to whatever in there. What if we don't have any more food? Yo, my body's like, if I make you throw up, you'll put more food in here. So upsetting.
Oh my gosh.
Oh God. Anyway, so that was my week. But now I've rambled on, but I feel like it's been fun. So
you should post I was gonna say you should post a picture of you in the tail or something because that's pretty cool.
I can do that. I'll do it.
Like
I'll
a
post
photo
it.
shoot.
Oh my God, I'll do it. We can share some on the TikTok. We can share some on the Insta. You guys can see my pretty tail. I'm gonna post it everywhere.
Post it everywhere. Spam in the world with this tail.
Everywhere. I literally wrote it on my notebook. Everywhere.
Post everywhere.
But anyways, do you have any book recs this week?
I didn't read anything. I feel like I should recommend something.
The Phantom of the Opera, I mean.
Oh, that's true.
I
should probably reread that before tomorrow. But
this is why I was gonna remind her. I was like, I wonder if she's gonna forget, then have to like crush reread it. And I was like, I feel like she'll remember. And then I forgot. And then I didn't remember to ask you about it.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's not too long if I remember correctly.
So, it's so much shorter than I thought. I read it in a day as well.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, I mean, yeah, I do remember really liking it. So Phantom of the Opera.
What's his name? Laveau or something like that. Don't quote me on it, but it sounds like that.
It's definitely something French. Like that. It's very French.
Definitely a French name.
Yeah.
It's definitely not spelled how it's pronounced. Therefore, it's probably French.
Yes. Lots of vowels, not enough consonants.
Yeah.
And the consonants that are there are often not pronounced. So yeah.
I will give my book rec again. Actually, I'll give you guys two book recs. I'm going to give you guys a bonus one. So Phantom of the Opera, also. It was pretty good, pretty short for a classic. Very hard if you've seen the movie a bunch to not picture it in movie form. And the movie is different in some noted ways, but I think it's more like, I kept thinking, I mean, we'll talk about this on TPBC, but I kept thinking when I was reading the book, I was like, well, why didn't they do it this way? And then I was like, oh, because it would be really hard to like show that in a movie. So I think the movie was still good. But anyways, go read the book. It's pretty short. And here's your bonus one that's also just total self-plug, because whenever it hits fall, I'm reminded that I wrote a book that was completely fall vibes, but also sci-fi, comedy, action, adventure, romance vibes. If that's too many vibes for you all, I might be a lot for you. But it's called Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World by Ashley O'Rourke. And you can go to Amazon and check it out. I think there might be a sample you can read. I don't know for sure. Hit me up if you want a sample. I can give you one. But it like the whole thing takes place between like right like before Thanksgiving. So like I think like maybe like end of October. I don't know. And then through Thanksgiving. So it's only like a few weeks that the story takes place, but like it's very much fall energy, especially if you live in the South, because it's like a Southern type fall. But anyways, it's funny. So now I have it on my desk because I'm like, I want to reread my own book, because I'm also like, it's officially been a year. I wonder if it still holds up. I guess we'll see. I mean, it's been more than a year since I wrote it, but it's been a year since I published it. So yeah, so we'll see. But anyways,
that's got to be kind of daunting. Like, what if I read it and find all of these things that I want to change and it's too late?
So I keep starting it and I'm going, oh, I have to do something else. And I put it down. So I've only made it through like a few chapters, and I was in the middle of recording an audiobook for it, but I need like an insane amount of like quiet around to record the audiobook, and I have to like be under the covers of my bed with the microphone because I don't have like a correct recording studio for that type of quality of recording. So I would need complete silence and to sit underneath my covers for hours to finish recording the audiobook. So hopefully it'll happen. I'll be honest, I don't think the audiobook will be ready for several more months at best, but
that's still pretty cool though. So
I think so. I mean, I don't know. The audiobook for the book that no one's actually asking for it for. I did have one person say, hey, if it's ever an audiobook, I'd listen to it. And I was like, okay.
Noted. We'll spend hours of time doing that for you.
Yeah, for the one person who asked for it, I got you. Absolutely. I think his name it's Jeff. Jeff is the one who asked me. Jeff, just for you, I am recording the audiobook.
And the rest of the world will benefit from your comment. I don't know.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think Marissa would read it because I think she listens to a lot of audiobooks while she travels, but I actually think she already read it and left me a really nice review.
Oh, cool.
So thank you, Marissa, for my review. Marissa's just a wonderful person, obviously. So.
She's just great. That's the theme today.
She's just great. I'm just, it's so funny. I just like attract these like really like sweet, wonderful blonde people into my life. It's weird. Like so many of the people in my life who I'm close to or have been close to are all blonde. And I'm like, where did this come from? Is this like a mommy thing? Because my mom,
I was going to say, it might be a mother thing.
It might be. I'm just like, if you have blonde hair, I trust you. Apparently. And you know what? It definitely is. Because also if somebody's bald, I'm like, I don't trust you.
The reverse situation.
Yes, exactly. Okay. But anyways, what's our word of the week?
Yes. Sockdolager. I've always heard this word, W-O-R-D. Okay, so it's spelled Sockdolager, and it is something that settles a matter, a decisive blow or answer.
Sockdolager?
Yeah, Sockdolager. So like if you're arguing and then someone comes back with like a really great answer and you like don't know what to say in response, then that was their Sockdolager.
Ooh, yeah. I like that. I cannot think of how to use that in a sentence right now.
I know.
Like I can see it, but I can't think of a good sentence to use it in.
Right.
That's difficult.
I assume it can also mean like a physical punch, like sock it to someone.
I like that.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. Sockdolager. As this is one of those words I'm going to pull out as if it's just normal commonplace to make everybody else feel inferior.
Right. It's always good to have a couple of those in your back pocket when you need them.
Absolutely. So. Especially at social events, because then you'll pull it out. Everyone will go, what an absolute pretentious ass. And then they don't talk to you, which is the goal. So
exactly. That is the introvert way. That's how you achieve that.
Yeah. That person you think is mean, actually not really mean, just introverted and does not want to talk in a social event, but hit them up later and talk about books or their interests and they'll be fine. As long as they can put you on, like leave you unread for a little while. I feel bad. I still do that to people and I'm like, I love you. Goodbye.
I love you. Talk to you in a few days.
Yeah, exactly. Well, should we get into the theme for our episode?
Yes. So this is part 3 for people who've been keeping track of our literary devices discussions. And today we're going to be talking about the debatable ones. So basically what I mean by that when I pick these out is they are technically, most of them at least, are technically grammatically incorrect, but they can be effective in creative writing situations and or they are things that people feel really strongly about one way or the other. So it's not necessarily hit or miss, but it's more of like a direct style thing, I guess I would call it. So so we're going to talk about these and whether or not we think you should use them. And maybe we will disagree, which would be fun.
I know. I'm thinking that we might, because occasionally, I think sometimes when it comes to like grammar rules, occasionally you're more like, don't break the rules. And I'm like, maybe break the rules. So I don't know. I do generally believe like, hey, they're there for a reason. And if you break them, you need to know why, which is what we said last episode, which is what we're going to come back to again. So just to preface, we're just going to get out of the way before we say it 100 times. Everything that we say and make it sound like a hard and fast rule is not typically a hard and fast rule. You just need to understand what the rules are. So when you break them intentionally, not just cause, and that will make your writing more impactful and also cleaner. And so everything we say is just general guidelines, but
I was going to put it, grammatical rules exist to like back up a principle of some kind. So if breaking the rules actually upholds the principle of the rule better than strictly adhering to the rule, that's when you break the rule.
Yep.
So you have to understand why the rule exists. It's usually for clarity. So as long as it's clearer in the way that you are writing it, you're probably good.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is almost always for clarity. So totally agree. And I think sometimes when using these though, is when people think, especially some of the ones from the last episode, I think people tend to use them because they think like, ooh, it like kind of makes my writing sound like more elevated or something. Yeah. And often that is what can make writing unclear. It's why so many classics are hard to read, because all like the flowery, elevated language, it makes you kind of lose the forest for the trees. So yeah. But anyways.
Yep. All right. So we'll just jump in. Also, a lot of these are going to be colloquialisms. So keep that in mind, and whether or not you think those should be in like prose and stuff. So the first one is actually not a grammatical incorrect one, but it's analogy. And analogies are often used interchangeably with metaphors, but they are different. An analogy creates a relationship based on parallels or connections between two ideas. So there has to be a pair of things that you're comparing. So for instance, as cold water is to the thirsty, so is love to the lonely. So you have to have that dual kind of parallel going on. So I think an analogy is something like, a doctor is to a hospital what a teacher is to a school or something like that. So they have to be in pairs like that. And using them, it just takes this familiar concept that then you can compare to the new thing you're trying to illustrate. So that can often add to clarity. I only think this is debatable in the sense that I think like metaphor, they are kind of hit or miss. You have to be very exact in the analogy. It really has to make sense from multiple angles. And that's tough to do well. So
it's true.
Yeah.
It has to be pretty cut and dry, honestly, for an analogy to work. Like the doctors are to hospitals as teachers are to schools. Like does it sound like, it just sounds like a duh. That's the kind of thing I feel like about analogies is it should be something that is so obvious that everyone goes, oh, duh, of course that's true.
Right.
Zero debate. Yeah,
exactly. And so if you can't necessarily, if there's something like even slightly off in the analogy, it's kind of like metaphor, but different. It's just going to feel slightly off.
Maybe use it as a simile instead. Because a metaphor is a little too strong for that still. Analogy might be too strong, but you might be able to pull it off as a simile.
Yeah, I would say like on the scale, it's like simile, analogy, then metaphor in terms of like how difficult is this to pull off because it's so hard and fast.
I agree. Yeah.
So just take it down a notch if it's not working. So if the metaphor isn't working, make it an analogy. If the analogy isn't working, make it a simile.
Yes.
If the simile is not working, take it out.
Yeah. Sometimes that's just easier, you guys. You're like, no, but it's beautiful. This is a great line. I've been working on it forever. And I'm like, save it.
Yeah. Put it away. Bring it back later. Yeah. So yeah, that's just, I just wanted to note that it is not the same thing as a metaphor. And I hear people use those interchangeably a lot, which I understand. They're very similar. And they often masquerade as a simile because they have an as in there usually. Yes. But they are also different. So
yes. It's true.
All right. So the next one is rhetorical questions, also known as aporia. It's aporia, I assume. Now, aporia is specifically when the answer isn't known. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a statement, like a leading statement. So rhetorical question is like a subset of aporia, but it's really more common than like leading statements necessarily. So it doesn't have to be a question. It's an sorry. It essentially tries to lead readers to a conclusion and ask them to consider for themselves, either because the answer is super obvious and you want them to come to that conclusion, or because there is no answer and you kind of want them to have to think about it and go a little deeper. So what's in a name from Romeo and Juliet, right? What's in a name? A flower by a different name would smell just as sweet. That kind of line, that's aporia or rhetorical question. Don't actually have to answer. And it's best used when you have like really strong debatable subject matter like religion or politics, and using rhetorical questions kind of lessens that blow if you're trying to make like a Sockdolager point.
Nice. Good one.
And it kind of forces the reader to admit the conclusion themselves rather than hearing it from you. So obviously this works really well in like speeches and nonfiction writing, but you can also use it in fiction to make some kind of thematic point or even a lower level point. Like, let's say that there's a love interest and they betray the main character, right? You can say something like, had he ever loved me at all? Right. And so then you have the reader thinking like, well, of course he did. It's just a misunderstanding. Or like, oh gosh, did he? I don't know. He's doing like all this crazy stuff. And so it forces the reader to kind of consider it further in a way that you don't necessarily want to go on about and waste space on.
Yeah.
So I really like rhetorical questions. I do think sometimes they can be abundant. I tend to use maybe too many because I try to make a lot of points sometimes. And I'm like, okay, you got to pick one and pull back. I think they can be used in a row, but you want to be kind of not choosy with them, but you want to make sure that the point you're making with the rhetorical question is actually something you want the reader to spend some mental space on.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's also because it's like a really good tool to use when you are like writing a speech or giving a speech. It's very emotional. So I think I typically see it in regard to like romance or like romantic pleas or dramatic speeches or speeches that are supposed to be moving. So I think if your intent is to either move your reader or move a character, either emotionally, romantically, whatever, I think that using a rhetorical question is a really good idea. And it's also just a writing style, because I've never noticed that you use too many. So I think it's probably just part of your voice as a writer that you use them. But if you have a moment that you want to increase the drama of, then I think rhetorical question is a great idea. If you're trying to move someone in a direction without like actually pushing them, instead of saying, love me, you know, because that's often what those romantic speeches mean, is what they all kind of boil down to. You use a rhetorical question that's really dramatic instead. And it just heightens the stakes and heightens the drama. And it just, because it gives the reader and the characters hypothetically this idea to like have their own thoughts about like, what would the answer be? And so it like increases kind of like the mystery of their feelings. So overall, if you want like a more like momentous moment or like a more moving moment in a book, I think rhetorical questions are a really good strategy. I think it's a really good device to use for that.
Yeah. And they can start or they can end. So you can state a rhetorical question and then kind of go into it a little bit if you want to, if that's relevant to your book, if you're not going to like end up preaching, if it is necessary for the main character to kind of think about it in depth, you can then go into detail. Or you can give a kind of general, overview of the situation and then end it with a rhetorical question. And I think they have different effects, obviously, but I think they're both really good. So I really like rhetorical questions.
So I really like them too. I think they're hard to overuse. I think if they're used correctly, they're hard to overuse. I think it's just more of a voice thing, how many you use. And just know that they do typically increase the impact of a moment, I feel like. So if you're trying to like play down a moment or it's not a really important scene, maybe save it for the next scene. But I don't know.
Yeah, they're good. All right. We're in agreement so far. Anyway, I feel like the next one, I don't know. This one is definitely more debatable. Cliche. So this can apply to any of the other literary devices. Every single literary device has a certain statement that eventually kind of becomes a cliche, which is an element of a saying or a saying itself that has been overused and become overly familiar to the point it has lost its original meaning.
Like what is the name?
Something like black as pitch or pitch black. What other examples do I have here?
Big Brother Sidewalk, which I believe is that's a quote about a cliche from, that's my phone, from Gilmore Girls.
Oh, is it? Okay. You have Big Brother is watching you. The idea of Big Brother, that's from 1984. So that's not an original idea. It doesn't mean anything outside of that. At the speed of light, been there, done that, get a grip, time heals. All of these are cliches. They started out as a really new and interesting way to communicate something, and they just got overused. And now they almost mean very little. I mean, at the speed of light is like, it almost doesn't even mean anything. It means fast, but it's not as clear as it could be.
You could literally say fast and it would be no different.
Be just as clear. So typically cliches do end up really unclear because they are they don't have as much effect, but they do tend to be clear. Because everyone knows what they mean. So it's like you don't really get credit for the cleverness of them. And there is a certain
thing. You didn't come up with it.
Right. And it's kind of like it's considered, I think, a weak literary device. It's like copying someone, like you don't have your own take on it. So you had to take from what everyone else already knows about, but it is really clear. So I feel like there are certain cliches that can be useful. So the one, I think we talked about this on the metaphor segment, the black is pitch, like no one really knows what pitch is, but I think if you say pitch black, people really know what that means, and it doesn't focus any attention on it while still making it clear that it's really dark.
I literally ran into that this week because I was like working on my edit of my book, and I was like, I really want to change this to like a different word for dark. And I was like, maybe black is pitch, and then I was like, absolutely not. No one knows pitch. And I was like, but pitch black would fit really well here. And I was like, but I'm trying to avoid that. But it's true. Pitch black evokes a very, even for people who don't know what pitch is, and even though it is a cliche, evokes like a very dark type of black. So
especially I think it's usually used to describe nighttime. So it's, I think if you use a cliche, you end up taking emphasis away from the thing you are describing, because people kind of just gloss over it. They're like, yeah, I've seen that before. I know what it means, moving on. It doesn't cause anyone to stop and think. But at the same time, maybe that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So you kind of want to lessen the impact, or you're just trying to you want them to know it's really dark, but it's not the most important part of the sentence or something.
Yeah. So instead of saying really dark, you say pitch black, and you're just using it like a standard adjective, just so you can breeze past, not because this is like, if you're going to spend like a paragraph on the darkness because the darkness itself is like important to the scene, or you're really setting the mood, then do not use pitch black.
Use something that is not a cliche.
Yes.
So yeah, I do think if you end up using a lot of cliches, it's going to make your writing look really weak, which is kind of unfortunate, because really at one point in time, these were new, and they were really like Big Brother in 1984. Like that was totally new. That was a completely new idea. And then it just got overused. And so it's almost like a shame that it doesn't hit us as hard as it should anymore.
It is a shame.
Because it's a good metaphor, or it's a good simile or whatever. But
it'll keep us all humble. One day we'll all be cliches.
I know. I'm not gonna lie. I think sometimes I come up with metaphors and similes, and I'm like, gosh, this would be awesome if this eventually became a cliche. Like because people just thought it was great and overused it.
I just used it. Yeah, I like that. And that happens with Red Pen Point, which is our correction segment on TPBC, and sort of over here too. And I know a couple people who say Red Pen Point now, or RPP when they were like, oh wait, I need to correct that. I know you do as well. Yeah. So I'm like, maybe it'll catch on.
Right.
Probably not, but I don't care.
Yeah, it would be awesome. I love it. It would just be cool to take credit for a cliche.
Exactly.
Anyway, also, I think they can be useful in dialogue, because people do use cliches a lot. So, I mean, people aren't going to be as lyrical in their dialogue as you might want to be in your prose. So, also, though, if you are writing in some kind of a sci-fi or fantasy or dystopian worlds, maybe be cautious to not use them in dialogue, because they wouldn't have any real purpose there. If it's like high fantasy or really distant sci-fi or something. Very true. So just be aware of what is a cliche. I think sometimes we legitimately skip over it in our brain, and we don't even realize that we're using one. We don't realize it's a metaphor. We're just like, black is pitch. That's just what it is. Yeah. But pitch is a thing that is separate from that metaphor.
Yeah, and that's why.
So I don't know. Cliches are the grammar side of me wants to say stay away from them at all costs, but I do think they can serve a purpose when they are just the clearest way to make something.
The dialogue living side of me says you're probably safe to use it unless, like Karissa said, there's some reason that cliche wouldn't have existed in the world. Like high fantasy, they probably wouldn't have the same cliches. Maybe they would have a couple, like maybe you could get away with black as pitch if it's like if they have pitch in that world, but just be very cautious of that. Sci-fi probably not going to have the same cliches. It depends on what kind of sci-fi you're writing, but you do need to be a lot more careful. Historical stuff also, a lot of cliches that we have weren't invented until after a certain time period. So if you're writing something historical, even if it's fiction, you might just want to be aware of what cliches you're using. But aside from that, you can pretty much get away with cliches in dialogue, because as far as, and I've always said this, and I will always say this, if it's in dialogue, you can break almost any rule if it's to make it sound natural, how people actually speak, because the whole idea is to imitate life. And so imitate the way that people speak is because people speak incorrectly. But so I think that applies to cliches as well. But yeah, there are certain genres you want to be really careful of that you just wouldn't even think about, because pitch black is just like,
that's what it is.
No, it's a cliche.
So cliches are fun. Anyway, so that's technically a literary device. Next we have diatribe, which I remember learning in school as a vocab word, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So
I use this word a lot. I'll be like, sorry for my long diatribe on XYZ.
So this is a diatribe is an angry or bitter criticism at length, usually in speech. I looked up, apparently Heart of Darkness is considered a diatribe. because it's all critical of I'm not going to remember exactly what was happening in Africa at the time, but it was critical of yeah. Also, a villain speech could be considered a diatribe.
A diatribe, yes. I always use it facetiously because I'll go off on like a really long text or a really long rant or something, and it's not typically like angry or bitter, like the actual like
fake definition. Criticizing.
It's like a fake criticism. So I'll be like, sorry for my diatribe, which is facetious, but I think often the way that we use the word diatribe is facetious. So I think that the meaning of diatribe has come to expand to include more than just like bitter and angry. I think it more means like passionate ranting. So
true. Yeah, for sure. So maybe even a hero speech could be considered a diatribe if they're talking about, like, you did all of these things wrong and I am upset about them and you deserve to be taken down for it or whatever.
And I will say this, I think diatribes have much more place in theater and screenplays and movies than they do in books.
Okay.
A diatribe, I feel like in a book has to be very justified and has to be somewhat limited, because on screen you could literally have like a 3-page long diatribe and it's not going to feel as long. If you have a 3-page long diatribe in a book, absolutely not. We're not doing that.
Well, and part of that is because like if it's on screen or live in some way, you have facial expressions and body language and other people in the background to focus on. But in a book, really, if you're reading, that line is the focus at the moment. And so you're not necessarily seeing everything going on around it. You're not seeing the body language, even if you put body language in. So it needs to be short. And I think if it's short, it's not a diatribe. So
I think diatribes are best steered away from unless you have like a character giving a passionate speech, which should happen like once per book max. So maybe you can get away with it twice if they're not really long. But I would say generally steer clear of diatribes. And also, if you're doing a diatribe, maybe you're going to use some rhetorical questions in there. I think a diatribe, you're going to want to use a lot of like rhetoric skills, like rhetoric devices, like you would do if you were giving a speech, because typically a diatribe is also intended to move somebody into something. So maybe the villain is off giving their diatribe because they're trying to justify their actions. They're trying to move the people they're talking to see how they're right, to see that they're really good, that their purpose is like worth all of this, evil.
I'm actually the good guy here.
I'm actually the good guy. Exactly. So that's diatribes are, I think, useful. The evil monologue, the villain's monologue that we always talk about, that's really a diatribe. And so are also kind of a cliche. They're also kind of overdone. So
and it kind of holds a lot of inherent exposition. Like this is why I did everything, and it's like great. You have a backstory, but
we don't
it's
like
not usually the best place.
No. So there's a little bit, I will say, Falling Kingdoms. I should have said that for my book rec. Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. Amazing book. I gave it 5 pieces up. I loved it. I need to read the whole series. But there's a part at the end where the evil king gives this really long, well, quote unquote, really long. It's more like we get the sense that it's really long and we're just getting snippets of it while the scene is actually happening, which I think is a great way to communicate that a diatribe is occurring without boring the hell out of your readers. And
you don't have to do it word by word.
Impact. Yeah, exactly. So big fan of that. It was excellent. And he used a lot of like rhetoric devices. It was really impactful. And he was definitely like trying to like move people to be like, I will be a good king for you. And you're like, you are an asshole for sure.
I do not believe you, but man, you're kind of convincing.
Exactly. That's the best diatribe, should be at least a little bit convincing. And so, I mean, I think that's a good way to do it. If you can't avoid it and you're like, no, this character really needs to give this big impassioned speech. We've said it before. I will say it again. Just try and break it up with some action, please. And also cut some stuff. And if it's exposition, don't put it in the speech. Have already given that information out. Don't.
It shouldn't be new necessarily.
No. It should almost, I think diatribes are almost more powerful when it's everything that we already know, but we're just hearing it from a character we haven't heard it from before. Like we already
from
kind
their
of
angle.
know. Exactly. Like we already know what's going on. We know what this evil king is doing. We kind of have an idea of why he's doing it, but we don't know how he sees himself. That's the one thing. And so the way that he delivers this diatribe kind of communicates how he sees himself to the people, which is different. So everything should provide new information we don't have before. But a diatribe is not the place for information delivery. It's like for moving people, for elucidation,
we shouldn't we shouldn't have to focus on things that happened in the past. The diatribe should really be about like what's going on now.
Yes, exactly.
I will say too, there are certain, I guess, experimental formats. So I read Fantastic Land by, is this Mike Bachoven? I think I recommended this and I did a Catherine's Corner on it. It's in an interview style. So I do think if you're doing some kind of found footage-esque type of thing, or like an information gathering thing, diatribes could work there, because that could develop character in that moment. If you like have only one interview with one character, like happens in Fantastic Land, there are a couple of them that kind of go off on diatribes. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. I was forced into this. This is what it was like. And, you know, bitter and angry and critical of everyone else, even if they were also a part of it. And so something in that style, it's definitely going to depend on the style. I don't think that a normal book format takes diatribes very easily. No. But something like that, where most of the book is just people talking in some fashion, that could work.
Yeah, that's it made me immediately think of maybe epistolary novels are a really good exception to this rule of no diatribes, because Illuminae, Aiden has a bunch of diatribes. I mean, technically all the characters do, but Aiden has some truly iconic diatribes, like really, really good. But because it doesn't interrupt the plot to deliver it, because it's just the way the story is told, it doesn't feel like a diatribe. And then even if you want to go classic, Dracula by Bram Stoker is an epistolary. And so technically a lot of that stuff is diatribes. And I will say every now and then I did feel like it got a little too diatribe-y, even so, but they can get away with it because it's just like, well, people diatribe. It's how they talk. It's how people like write letters and stuff.
That's the point of a diary and a letter and all that kind of stuff.
It's just a long diatribe, often to yourself. So, or to somebody else if it's a letter. So I think that if you're writing an epistolary novel, that might be more of an exception to the please avoid diatribes rule. But that's the only really notable exception I can think of.
It's as per usual, it's like follow the rules normally, but there are going to be exceptions.
But there's some exceptions. But we always say, like, just don't no long impassioned speeches. Like, know your theme, know what you're trying to communicate, but don't like push your ideals on your readers. And almost always that's what diatribes are for when they're used incorrectly. So just if you see a diatribe, maybe try to figure out, why did I put this here? What am I trying to accomplish? And how can I accomplish it in a different way that's not using this?
Because especially because diatribes tend to be so black and white. It does not acknowledge the other side. That's not the point at all. It's not fair, essentially. So, you know, really going to be a villain thing or a flawed hero thing. And even then, you don't want to get to the point where your readers feel like you are pushing something. It is typically
when it's done right, like a flawed character, like a deeply flawed character. That's so funny. Because also, if you're like really in the right, I think often you feel like you don't have to justify yourself. I feel like it's when everyone is against you. And it's like, well, maybe it's because you're wrong. Then you're like, no, just let me prove my point. And then it's like,
but aren't you like maybe just a little insecure in that then?
Exactly. It's insecurity is what it sounds like. It comes from insecurity. So know that too, because you could be like, no, my hero's giving this impassioned speech because I want to get this point to my readers. Well, he's given this diatribe and now he sounds like he has no self-confidence at all.
Right. Exactly. You've undermined that point. So just like cut some stuff, make it shorter, make him maybe less emotional about it. He's just telling it like it is. So
it's true. It's like they say, only a fool argues with fools. So if you're that's the vibe that I feel like I get from a lot of diatribes. It's like, are you really trying to argue this? Maybe you're foolish if you think that the people you're talking to don't know anything and they're just too dumb to understand what you're saying. So you're going to give this long speech. Doesn't that make you dumb also? That you're going to waste all this energy on trying to communicate something they've already said that they don't agree with?
Right.
I don't know. So
depends. But so that's diatribe. What is next? Idioms. Idioms are next. This is a metaphor or figure of speech that differs from its literal meaning. So something that actually doesn't make any sense. It is not a good comparison. Usually these are something where they start in dialect and they make sense. And then over time, people skip the middle steps. And then you get this premise and then conclusion. And you're like, that doesn't actually make any sense. So fit as a fiddle. That doesn't actually mean anything. Piece of cake. What cake is not easy.
Nope. Some cakes are actually very difficult to make.
Exactly. Break a leg in theater, right? That's got to have some origin somewhere, but no one really remembers what it is. Jump through hoops. Kick the bucket, right?
I've always been confused about kick the bucket.
Is it? I always thought it was that people would commit suicide by standing on a bucket and hang themselves and they kick the bucket out. And so that's how it became a metaphor for death.
Whoa, probably.
maybe I just made that up, but I
No,
think
that
that's where it
sounds
came
right.
from, but it
But
skips
because
the
it's
step.
an idiom, you wouldn't know for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. And it expanded it out. So it's not just like suicidal death, it's all death.
Any
Someone
death.
kicked the bucket
Yeah.
if they died of cancer or something.
Wow. I've used this phrase a lot in my life. And now I'm like, wait, should I know where that came from?
Yeah. I know sometimes you find out where they originated and it's not your fault. It becomes a colloquialism, but you're like, gosh, should I be using that?
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the South, unfortunately. We have a lot of things like that where you'll say something and then if you ever go look up the origins, you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. However, you can't assume that everyone who uses it is horrible because no one knows where it came from anymore. It's just like fit as a fiddle. I don't know where that came from. It could come from something horribly offensive. Would anybody know? Would I assume that somebody who said it is an evil person? If so, no, because I didn't know what it was.
Exactly. So idioms are weird. Oh, another one is turn over a new leaf. I don't know where that one came from either. I guess maybe fall, like turning out,
because we can only guess.
I know, we don't know. Yeah. So the thing about idioms is that they're basically either going to be a cliche or you're making something up that doesn't make any sense because it has to start somewhere in dialect, in like an understood like regional thing. So idioms are weird you can't like really create your own idioms unless it is part of your world building. And so if you're writing a fantasy story, I know I'm big on world building.
Yes.
So this is a great way.
The Tolkien among us.
This is a great way to make your world seem deeper. You can just make up idioms and you can know where they originated technically in the world, or they can just be nonsense and no one in your world remembers where they came from. So that can be a good way to add depth. At that point, though, you are going to have to either contextually or somehow else explain what that idiom means so that readers aren't totally lost.
Don't mix them with idioms that people do recognize. Either use idioms people recognize or don't use any at all or make up your own. But like, don't mix those three options.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, idioms are strange. They're just colloquialisms.
I just generally avoid them, but I think it's just because I write so much sci-fi and fantasy that I have no real purpose for them. It would take people out of the world because escapism is my thing. And so I'm like, I don't want anyone reminded of the world that we actually live in. Although, you know what, I probably do use a lot in, ironically, space alien Southerners and saving the world because the whole idea is it's like kind of making fun of Southerners a little bit. So it probably has a lot of those in there, but generally not my thing. Yeah. Generally, I don't do it.
And I just think they're basically always going to be cliches. So
they are. So if you're in doubt, just don't. I mean, I think maybe that might be the general advice for this episode. Like if in doubt, you probably don't need to use
Shy away from it.
Yeah.
So the next one, it can feed into this. So it kind of can create idioms. That's malapropisms.
I forgot what this one means.
That's okay. It is the use of an incorrect word in place of a similar sounding word, often humorous.
I like this one because it's funny, because it should only be used. As an editor, I come across this a lot when I'm like, that's not what you meant. And then I will be like, this is the word you actually meant. But like when a character does it because they're goofy or because they're a little kid, I'm in love. I love it so much. So use it only with intention, only use it on purpose. And this is why I always have somebody look at your book, because you never know which word you thought went in that phrase and it actually is a different word completely.
Yes. The one that I see a lot, and it really bothers me just because the words have such different meanings, is if you are not weary of someone, you are wary of them.
Wary.
If you are suspicious. Yes. It's Javi just an A. Take out the E.
Yes. Javi does this a lot. And I think it's so funny. So sometimes I don't correct him because I'm like, that was cute. And sometimes I'm like, I'm very annoyed, but I'm
stop.
Hold back. But that's not the phrase.
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, weary means exhausted. Yeah. And wary means suspicious. So don't mix those up. Those are different things. You could be both, but you're not going to be like, they're not the same word.
They're not the same word.
Yeah. So that's a couple other examples are alcoholics unanimous. It should be anonymous. Jesus healed leopards. He healed lepers. Are you okay?
I'm sorry. I obviously love these. I'm dying.
Yes.
My allergies are
Ash likes
so
them.
bad. I'm so sorry, but I do really, really like it. I shouldn't be drinking red wine with my allergies, but
whatever.
Continue.
But yeah, so Jesus healed leopards. No, he doesn't. He healed lepers.
Yeah, he could, but he didn't.
Yeah. This does not portend to be good art. It's pretend. He upset the apple cart. So it's just stuff like that where oftentimes you might just mishear it or, whatever. Kids use them a lot because they don't understand the definitions. They're copying parents and it's cute. So you can use this in dialogue for some child characters. That would be pretty cool.
I think that's great. It's a great way because sometimes child dialogue is, I think it's really hard to nail. And I think that when it's bad, it's really bad. So
yeah. Kids, people will either dumb kids down too much or make them sound too smart. And I'm like, there is a middle ground. They don't know big words, but they are intelligent.
Yeah,
so
very intelligent.
Find that
don't have the communication an adult would have.
Yes,
exactly. Now, one that I hear a lot and see a lot in writing is specially and especially.
Oh, yes.
Which are different words. I will give you this. They do have somewhat similar meanings, like more so than like weary and wary, but they are different words. Also, sometimes specifically gets mixed up with those, and I'm like,
yeah. So I was going to say specific and Pacific, which children do a lot. They're like, I specifically wanted this. No, you specifically did.
But you were
but I love you.
You're very, very cute. I specifically feel that you're very, very cute.
Right.
It's just sort of a way to use that word.
Yeah. So I just kind of wonder if a lot of idioms came from malapropisms too.
I think that's very possible. I feel like I've heard of that happening. So I'm sure.
It probably has at least once. But yeah, the big one for this one is don't do it on accident. Just make sure you know what words mean. And it's okay. Like I find myself Googling words that fifth graders know just to make sure that I know what I'm talking about and that I have the right version of the word. If you can't understand effect and affect, look it up. That doesn't make you a bad writer. It doesn't make you bad at English. It's make sure. And
than.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, including, things like specially versus especially and all of that kind of stuff.
I used to think it was window seal. It's a window sill. So
nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have a bunch from childhood. I just don't remember. Although, I still don't actually know what the correct one is. Is it play it by ear or play it by year?
Play it by ear.
Ear?
By ear.
Okay.
It's a music
I always
reference.
say year. Is
it's
it?
A reference to if you can sight read, or like some people can read music and they'll have to either learn it or read it, or some people can hear a song and then they can go, oh, I know how to play it, and they'll play it by ear.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really useful because I've definitely thought it was year because like my logic is you're playing it out as time goes on, but the ear thing makes more sense.
Yeah,
so
I'd play it by ear. I would otherwise say, they're playing the long game. Yeah, play it by ear. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, sometimes you just don't know. And I have avoided putting that phrase in my writing and texts for years because I did not know and I was too afraid to ask. So now I know.
That's adorable. Play it by ear. I think that's where it came from because that's what we say
that makes sense.
In like the music world. Yeah. But it's always possible that that's an idiom and that we've adopted it to that use and it does make sense for it, but maybe that's not where it came from. I don't know. But I would say that's what people say. And I think that's where we all think it came from at the very least.
Right. Yeah. All right. Cool. Good to know.
Not all of us. Karissa doesn't.
I didn't. But that's what now I do. And I will remember it because there's an explanation behind it. So there we go.
I like that one because I feel like it makes sense because there's an explanation.
Yeah,
but
it does.
I like play it by ear though. That sounds nice.
I know. I always liked it. I always thought I was right and everyone else is wrong. And then eventually like I got older and a lot of really intelligent people. I was like, okay, college educated people are now using this. Am I wrong? And I am. So
know your critics, know when to trust your critics.
Yeah. So anyway, malapropisms. It can also be just a character quirk, like you said, if someone's being goofy. You can also use it in world building to name places. I feel like Wrinkle in Time did this, but I'm not remembering any specific examples.
Same, but I do feel like that's a Wrinkle in Time thing to do. I feel like that's very much the vibe.
Yeah, especially in something like middle grade, if you're naming places or whatever, they can be malapropisms and kids will find that funny or they'll just assume it means something it doesn't mean and move on.
Obert Sky, Levin, Thumps in the Gateway to Foo, I believe he did it some. I think Anne of Green Gables might have done this a little bit as well. But
it does have kind of a childlike feel to it.
Whimsical.
So if that's
whimsical.
If that's what you're going for, go for it. If you're not, definitely be on the lookout for those.
And this is why just have someone else read your book, preferably someone with experience editing or knowledge of the literary world, because like even Karissa, who's over here like with a degree and has spent her entire life writing, got that one mixed up, because everyone has something that we think makes so much sense to us that we just learned a certain way, and it might actually be different. So like especially specifically, that's one I've seen really good writers use. So like this is just have someone else check if you're not 100, even if you are 100% sure. You
double
might be
check.
like, oh, wait a minute, is that not what that means? Same with weary and wary. Very intelligent people who are educated. It bothers me too. But people who know better, or you would think know better, they use it as well. So it's not like a sign of you're stupid. It just, we all learn something's different. So have someone else check your work.
Yep. And the wary and weary one too. I feel like if you live somewhere where people have a thick accent, they probably just sound the same. And so you've never seen it written down, and you just assume that the verbal is a good example.
Yes, this happens a lot in the South as well.
Yeah.
Well, our words do not sound very normal sometimes. Everything has either more or less syllables than it needs to.
Yeah. So it might just be regionally where you're from that you have confusion with some of these, and that's not a bad thing or your fault. So just double check.
Exactly. And then it's okay if it's in the dialect for that character, if they're going to speak that way, if that's where they're from. So it makes sense. So again, intentionality and dialogue is easier to break rules with.
Yeah. So that's malapropism. Next we have oxymoron. Combines words with contradicting definitions to make something new. I have heard oxymoron is in and of itself an oxymoron, but I do not know what the original root words are. So someone out there knows.
I just like to call people an oxymoron because it has the word moron in it. And they're like, what would you call me? And I'm like, an oxymoron, which actually doesn't mean anything at all.
So some examples are awfully good, jumbo shrimp, freezer burn, almost exactly, living dead, only choice, pretty ugly, and small crowd. I think they're fun. I like them a lot.
I think they're fine. They are technically incorrect, but I think they're perfectly fine.
So I think they typically contribute to like dramatic effects, or irony.
One, because fine would imply it's just average, and perfectly is like perfect.
I would think so.
I say perfectly fine. I think I use it a lot.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be analyzing my speech.
I know we probably use oxymorons a lot because we just don't, again, they become almost cliche, and we stop hearing what we're actually saying when we say them.
But they're not as specific as cliche, so I think you can get away with them.
Yeah, true. I do just want to say again, for a world building point, oxymoron, the one that really stuck out to me is living dead, because that's just zombies usually. And that didn't always exist. I mean, nothing always existed, but that's a world building thing. That's what you call a monster in a certain universe. So you could potentially create an oxymoron to describe something in your world building. If there's a monster, if there's a certain kind of building, particularly if it is somehow a contradiction, like the dead coming back to life. So that could be a good world building thing. But in general, if you're using it in prose, either if it's a common one and it is descriptive, like jumbo shrimp, if your characters are at a buffet and there's jumbo shrimp there, you can use jumbo shrimp. That's fine. But it can also just be ironic, and you might specifically be trying to contradict yourself to make a point too.
Very possible. I think a lot of them that are used in our like normal everyday dialogue are often to like couch the impact of a statement, if that makes sense. Like I said, perfectly fine, which kind of like couches the idea of it being fine, and also couches the idea of it being perfect, and makes it like
it's like better than fine, but not
perfect. Yeah, exactly. So I think that we do that a lot. I'm trying to think of like, I know for a fact I use this a lot in my speech, sometimes to like make the hard things sound easier as well. Like almost exactly, stuff like that, where you're like, that's definitely the opposite. But I
those don't go together, but
we use it a lot, especially when you're being diplomatic.
Middle child syndrome, you might tend to use oxymorons more often.
This is why I like these.
They are fun. So then all of those, not all of those necessarily, but the last three or so I think are kind of related to the next one. Double entendre, which is my dad's favorite, and he often tries to use them. That's just,
you lowered your voice. Is that a secret?
No, it's not really relevant. I was trying to figure out how to end that statement, and I'm like, I don't know if anyone cares, but anyway.
I was like, cool. Tell me more.
He just really likes double entendres, and these are figures of speech
the things I know about your dad now. I know those two things.
Now you know two things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, double entendres are figures of speech that might have multiple interpretations or two meanings. One is straightforward or literal, and the other is ironic or inappropriate. I found one that I thought was funny. I feel like you'll appreciate it. Marriage is a fine institution, but I'm not ready for an institution.
That's a good one.
Right. Institution being both like the institution of marriage and like a mental institution.
Yes. You know who's the master of the double entendre is Oscar Wilde.
Yes.
If you guys want to see the master, just go read The Importance of Being Earnest real quick. It's very fast, I promise you. It is chock full of double entendres and it's amazing.
Yes. And the great thing about double entendres is that you can technically miss the underlying meaning and still understand what's going on. So like I had a friend, I mean, we're still friends, but he did not understand sarcasm at all. Like you would say something to him and he'd be like, oh my gosh, really? And I'm like, I'm being sarcastic.
No. Yeah.
And he's tried to get better at it over the years, but he's still just, his brain does not connect to sarcasm. So double entendre, he can still understand what's being said. He's just not getting the extra layer. Yeah. So double entendres are great, I think, because you kind of reach everyone. No one's kind of left behind in the same way that something like an innuendo might be.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah. Another example that I really like is from the Odyssey, when he's on the island with the Cyclops and he asks what his name is. So he says his name is Nobody. So then he's calling for help and he's like, nobody has hurt me. Nobody is going to kill me. And everyone's like, okay, why are you talking about this? Because they don't realize it's a name.
It is a good one. I love these. I do really love these. How can you not? They're almost hard. I feel like they take like your brain has to work a certain way to be really good at them. Like it to be really clever, but
it took me a minute. Yeah, it took me a minute to understand the marriage one. I was like reading and I was like, what? And I was like, oh, the other kind of institution. So a lot of the times, if you are trying to come up with one, find a word that has dual meanings. Are those, it's not homophones, is it? Whatever the word is for a word that has multiple definitions. So like institution has two meanings. There are other words. None are coming to mind right now. Oh, actually book is one. So like book is a physical thing. It's also to book, like book a room or something.
Yeah, to book an appointment.
Yeah, anything like that where the word has multiple meanings is good fodder for a double entendre.
Yes.
Yeah, they're just humorous and
they're funny and they make you feel smart when you get them.
Yeah.
But they don't make you feel clever if you miss them. So
exactly. Nice. That's why they're nice. That is what it is. They make you feel smart if you get them, but you don't feel dumb if you don't. Because you likely don't even realize you missed something.
Yeah. So every time I reread The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, I'm like, oh my God, wait, this is also double entendre and I just didn't get it last time, which is so great. I think Mark Twain does it a lot too. It's like a certain type of humor as well, which I think is very funny. Also, shout out to my sister. She tried to FaceTime me and she gets mad when I don't give her a shout out when I hang up on her. Sorry. She says, I just saw your tail with all these L's. Thank you. She didn't say a compliment, but I'm sure she meant it. So I'm just going to say thank you.
It was just a vibe of excitement.
Yes. I'm in love with my tail and my husband, but mostly my tail.
That seems fair.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you like good for me to continue?
I'm good. Sorry. Continue.
Okay. Yes. No, you're good. I just don't want to keep talking. And then you're like, what are we saying? What are we saying?
I know I'm bad about that. No, continue.
Okay. All right. So the next one is paradox, which is a statement that first appears contradictory, but upon reflection makes sense. And I think it just allows for understanding in more complex ways. So a couple of kind of cliche ones are damned if you do, damned if you don't, less is more, the pen is mightier than the sword, the only constant in life is change, that kind of stuff. Like it's obviously like
can't live without them.
Yeah, like obviously it's not true. You have to do one or the other. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you're actually illustrating a frustration with one while saying you don't want the other one, or something along those lines. Impossible is not a word in my vocabulary is another good one, because obviously it is because you just used it. But what you mean is the meaning.
Not a word. Yeah, literally anything is not a word in my vocabulary. Well, if you said it, it is a word in your vocabulary.
Exactly. So this is also one that it has a literal meaning. The literal meaning doesn't really make any sense, though, which is the opposite of double entendre. But when you look at it deeper, it kind of makes a deeper point. Something like the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Obviously, no. In a fight, the sword is going to win. Someone really skilled to the pen is still going to lose in a fight to someone that just picked up a sword for the first time.
In a physical battle, absolutely.
Yes. But obviously what they mean is that you are more effective writing things down and like speaking to people than fighting them. So
exactly.
I'm sure you guys understand what that means. I'm just trying to illustrate how like there's that deeper meaning. And I think paradoxes are really hard to write unless they come out naturally.
Yes.
But I do love them when they happen because they make no sense. You kind of stop and read it again, and then you're like, oh, okay. Like, and you kind of see what's going on.
Sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like an analogy in a certain way.
I don't even know how you would force one of these. Like, I feel like it either comes to you or it doesn't. If you are out there trying to like force one, I would say don't. But I can't even imagine that happening because like if you don't have one, you don't have one.
Yeah. I don't even know how you would go about, like with double entendre, you can say, okay, what's a word that has multiple meanings to start with, but I don't know what you would do with paradox.
I don't even know how you would start with that. I feel like you just have to like have something that you feel enlightened about that you're like, oh, this is true, but sounds crazy and like it shouldn't make sense. So yeah, I guess if you're kind of a crazy person and you say a lot of nonsense, eventually a paradox will come out. Which again, Oscar Wilde, Mark Twain, the men and women who like to say a lot of nonsense, I feel like they're good at this. And I don't know if it's just because if you say so much nonsense, eventually something smart's going to come out. I don't know if it's just that, like statistically, of course, you're going to hit upon it, or if it's just the way that their brain works. I think it's probably a combo. But this is also very much Oscar Wilde, Mark Twain territory.
I do think too, I really like Owl City, right? The musician. And I think he has a lot of these because I'll have discussions with people and they're like, he's just saying nonsense. And I'm like, right, but it's deep nonsense. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is. I can go into so much detail about it. Like, it's so cool. So another thing with paradox is that it is probably going to come across as nonsense. And this is one where people will miss it if they don't get the deeper meaning. So, I mean, again, basically all of these are about emphasis. If you're trying to emphasize something, use the paradox if it comes to you. If it's not something that really matters, don't go with nonsense because nonsense is confusing. Also, Alice in Wonderland. There are a lot of lines in that book that people are like, this is just nonsense. And I'm like, but actually, I think it means this. How is a raven like a writing desk, you know? Is
it because of the quill?
I don't know. The answer I always heard was Poe wrote on both. But
interesting.
Yeah. But I've never clear on the timeline. Was Lewis Carroll before Poe?
I don't know.
That might have been a later thing.
Anyone out there, if you know how a raven's like a writing desk, please DM us.
Yeah, submit your answers for our paralysis, for our perusal. That was a malapropism.
It was a malapropism. I like it.
It's totally natural. Anyway,
I have a really good malapropism, but this it's gonna sound totally weird and random.
Okay.
I was trying on my mermaid tail and Caleb was like, that's perfect, we should have fish sticks for dinner. And I was like, well, we are having fish for dinner. He's like, oh, that's right, I forgot that you downloaded the fish already. And I was like, what did you say? And he's like, I meant to say like de-thawed, which also is stupid. It's also redundant because it's just thawed, by the way. De-thawed. But I was like, oh my God, downloaded and de-thawed. I thought it was interesting. Very funny. I've been like chuckling about that for hours now.
Yeah. That's a very like modern age kind of like downloaded.
Yeah. I downloaded
replaced for another word. Yeah.
So weird.
You what?
I was like, what did you say?
Oh my gosh.
Great.
Oh, Caleb.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like paradoxes. I don't know how to tell you how to create them, but if they come up, go for them if that's where you want your emphasis.
They happen or they don't happen. If you have one, you have been blessed.
Yes, use it somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Next one is pastiche. And not only do I love saying that word, and if I'm saying it wrong, I don't want to know. It is a literary work that imitates or borrows from another, not to mock, but to celebrate. So it can refer to like a specific plot thing.
Gotcha.
It can refer to combinations of styles put together. This is what I want to know. Do you think tropes count? Are tropes pastiches? Are they pastiche?
I think you could argue that they are. Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't come to mind first for me, but I mean, I think you could argue that, yeah, sure.
I think maybe combinations of tropes are kind of pastiches. So like if you use, I think the one that kind of goes, the ones that go together now are the enemies to lovers, one bed, and touch her if you die. If you guys have heard those three, people talk about those a lot. Yeah, they talk about them a lot in tandem. That might be a pastiche. I don't know what it's a pastiche of. What would be the original of
Yeah,
that.
I would say the same thing for archetypes, because I was thinking, well, is an archetype pastiche? And I think
Right.
no, but I think when you see multiple archetypes together, it could be pastiche.
Yeah.
Like the counselor, the lover, and the jokester is very much Romeo and Juliet. That's very much, Romeo, Benvolio, Mercutio, but you see those archetypes in a lot of other books together as well.
Right.
So I think maybe that counts as pastiche.
Like,
so maybe it's
kind of friend groups.
Yeah, it's more specific than just like a archetype or a trope. It's combined ones that have come from something else. Or, I mean, would an illusion or an allegory count as pastiche as well?
Again, not a single one on its own, but maybe in combination with other things, I would think.
Yeah. So if it was like, or like a retelling is pastiche.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So like it has all of the Shakespeare remakes, like that are movies that are based on, those are all pastiche because they're like, they're not illusions or allegories. They just actually are the thing. But if you tell like an allegory of an actual like whole story, like you take like one of the parables from the Bible and you make a whole story about it, that's pastiche.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I just, the thing about this one that I think is weird is I don't even know if you can avoid doing this. I guess certain combinations haven't been done before, but there are so many stories out there. And
Nothing new under the sun. Is that a idiom or?
I think it's a cliche.
It's a cliche. Yeah, I think
because I think it makes sense on its own. So I think it's a cliche. But pastiche is just weird because. And then is it a pastiche if you accidentally copy something, like you haven't read the book, but you happened upon a lot of the same tropes and style details?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think that author's intention really plays that much into it. Just like an author could write one story and the readers read a completely different story, but that story is still valid. So I think if somebody reads it and goes, "Ooh, it's a pastiche," I think that, it's probably a pastiche. But I don't think an author has to intend for it to be, or even know that what they're writing is a pastiche of something else, because inevitably, because of the cliche of there's nothing new under the sun, which is very true, inevitably there's gonna be. But also no two people are alike, which is or no two snowflakes are alike, which is another cliche. But so everything's going to be a little bit different, even if it's been done before. So just because I think a lot of us probably stumble upon writing pastiches without knowing it does not mean that it's not still original. So it's again about being intentional for yourself. Like if you know that you're writing a pastiche, like make sure you're taking, care to be original where you can. If you don't know that you're writing it, you're probably already be original. So you don't really have to worry about it. So
Yeah. So I guess just don't feel like you have to avoid it at all costs, because I don't even know if you can.
I don't know if you can.
So
no, I don't think so.
So just be aware going forth of that one. All right, next one. This one's super common, I think. Run-on sentences. I don't know if there's a literary device name for this, but it's a thing. Technically grammatically incorrect, right? These illustrate
wildly on my feelings about run-on sentences.
They illustrate cluttered or panicked thoughts, I think, even on the part of the narrator. So it has to be kind of a high emotion scene. If you're kind of, like, I love them so much, and you go off and it becomes a run-on sentence, or, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Or like a fight scene can kind of go on in a run-on way. A similar one is I have it on the other page, a polysyndeton, something like that. And that's a device in which several coordinating conjunctions are used in succession. So like we need ships and men and money and stores. And so not all run-on sentences are going to take that form, but it is a literary device in that form. It has a name and everything. So it's not grammatically correct. Technically, you need to have a comma and an and only you need to have commas and then an and only before the last one. But I think if you're trying to illustrate some kind of panic or high emotion or high energy, some tension, I think run-on sentences work really well. And I
think so too.
I tend to use them. So
I do too. It's that thing where like when you get into flow, and newer writers might not quite have a feeling for flow yet, unless they have like a natural feeling for it. But it's something that you typically, I think, develop the more time you spend writing. And that's when, like we've said before, that's when you'll kind of get a sense of, okay, it's okay to break this rule now. Because there's times when you have like a really high stakes scene, or if you're approaching a climax, that you don't want there to be any kind of stop in the action, because it would drop the like anxiety. It would like drop the momentum. And so when you need momentum to keep increasing exponentially in a scene, you don't want a bunch of shorter sentences, even if that would be the grammatically correct way to do it. So instead you do it like a run-on one, or you do the one I can't pronounce that you just said, you do like
polysyndeton.
A polysyndeton. And so I think it's okay, because again, if you have a purpose for it, it's fine. But typically we use it in a moment when we need to make sure momentum increases and increases and does not drop. Like I just said, and increases and increases and increases.
Yeah, exactly.
It like communicates the urgency of what I'm saying, you know?
Exactly. I think to keep in mind that run-on sentences are probably going to be read quicker as well. They're going to be read through faster. So if that's what you're trying to do, great. If you're trying for a moment in which people slow down and pause, do not go with a run-on sentence, because that's not what's going to happen.
Well, it's like knowing what you're doing. So you need to understand the rules so you can break the rule in a strategic way. Because if you're just using them and you don't know you're using them, you could be messing with the flow of a scene that does not need to have that flow. You could be making the flow of a scene like imitate the flow of a scene that should be a climax. And so people are like, wait, is something important going on? But no, this is not that scene. And so it kind of lets your readers down. So it's about knowing the rules so that when you break them, you do it on purpose.
Yeah. And I think too, if we're saying this and you're like, well, if I then break the rules a couple times, people won't notice. I do think it is very noticeable when you did it on purpose versus when it's accidental. And I cannot put a finger on why, but I feel like I can usually tell if it was on purpose. And a lot of it has to do with, is this where someone would have reasonably put this kind of emphasis and tension?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then it was probably on purpose and it was a flow decision that they made. If it's not, or I feel like other sentences are where the focus should have been and it's just oddly focused, then it's probably just a mistake and more editing is needed.
I think the only time I notice it is when it makes the flow in a scene feel like it's moving too fast or too slow for what's going on. I think that's the only time I've ever noticed it. So it's one of those things where like you can break the rule and probably no one will even know if you do it right. If you do it wrong, it will be noticeable.
Yes, exactly. Which you don't want people to notice. So
no, we don't want them to know we're breaking the rules. We just want them to enjoy the results.
Exactly. Okay, this is one I really like, but I also hate, so it'll be fun. Anthemeria is how I assume you say it. This is when you use a word in a new grammatical shape, i.e. what Ash does with the words of the week. So you take a verb and you use it as a noun, or you take a noun and you use it as an adjective. That's
very Sockdolager of you.
Thank you. I use this one a lot when you're talking about cliffhangers. I will say, like, don't cliffhang people. Cliffhang is not a verb, but I use it as one when I use it that way. That's so drama. I've heard people say that, right?
That's
drama.
That
kind of stuff. It is actually used a lot in some older classics. I think Shakespeare does it, and
does it for sure.
a lot of poetry does it.
One of these things,
he does. He makes words up off the top of his head, particularly compound words, but also just stuff like this. So the thing about this one is that, I mean, it is technically grammatically incorrect, and it can be very confusing if you are using a word in a completely different format than people are normally used to it. But language grows over time. This is something you learn if you take any literature class at all, or English class. It's going to change. It's going to grow over time. Certain words fall out of use or come into use in different ways. I think authors do sometimes contribute to that when they use words like this.
I think so. Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it is going to be a really hit or miss thing.
Yeah.
So I would,
with the idea of don't cliffhang people, if that's your point, I think that's like the most concise way to say it. So I think in that case, it's fully justified. So I think again, like this is one that has to be really well justified, and then it's fine. And again, much better in dialogue because people don't speak directly. So it's okay. But
true. And you can kind of get away with it as a character quirk.
Yeah.
I think too, I had another point. What is it?
Sorry.
No, you're good. Oh no, my brain just went completely blank. I don't remember what it is, but I like this one. That's what I say. But I also hate it. It's very hit or miss. Oh, I remembered. I would say that with this one, only use it if there's absolutely no other way for you to say what you're trying to say. If it is really the best way you can think of to say it, if somehow you lose the clarity by actually using the correct form of the word, that's the only time you should use it, I think. I agree. And then at that point, it will feel natural. The meaning will be clear, because the biggest risk with this one is that people will not understand what you're trying to say, or they'll kind of get it, but it'll be so weird that they are thinking more about how weird it was rather than what you were trying to say.
Yes.
And you don't really want to do that, again, unless it is a character quirk. So if it's adding to the clarity, go for it. I don't know how like literary agents feel about it. I don't know that I would use it in like your opening chapter. I would strive away from that. I would maybe only include it later in a book or in later books that you've published.
Yeah, I guess unless it's a character thing, like you have like a Mercutio type character.
Yeah.
If it's very indicative of a character's personality, maybe you can get away with it earlier on.
Yeah.
But
because it's just, it can look too much like you just don't know what you're doing, kind of like a malapropism. It can look like a mistake as opposed to a purposeful thing. So yeah.
I agree.
Yep. All right. Anyway, I still have a few more. I know we're kind of running long, but anyway, the next one is portmanteau. Is that how you say it? Portmanteau? Joining two or more words together to create a new word, like snark, which is snide remark. Brunch, breakfast and lunch. Telethon, telephone marathon. And blog, and then vlog, which is a portmanteau of a portmanteau. Because blog is something, it's like something log. And then vlog is video blog. So I think these are great for world building, as is usually my point in these scenarios. In prose, I think it risks a lack of clarity. So I wouldn't use these just naturally. They can be in dialogue, they can be in conversation, and they can be a world building thing, but I would not use them just naturally.
Contemporary story. If you're writing like a contemporary story and it's something about like she was watching the vlog of blah blah blah, like
so I think using existing ones is fine because everyone knows like what brunch is. But if you're going to try to make one up, I think you either need to use it significantly in dialogue first or just shy away from it, because it's going to get too confusing. So you can use existing ones because they're just words now. I don't know if any of those are in the dictionary. I imagine snark is in the dictionary.
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah.
Probably brunch. This is what I mean by language changes. You can make decisions like this, and then people 100 years from now are using the word like it's always been a word.
Exactly.
Which would also be awesome.
Yeah. It's very much a personality thing if your character uses these, like a Mercutio type. Again, characters who are not only clever and confident, but feel that they are clever and confident are more likely to do things like the last one that we talked about, which I already forgot what it was called, and use portmanteaus. And Nymphomeria, or using a portmanteau, because they're so confident in their own cleverness that they're like, everybody will get it. So it has to be a personality trait if you have a character that's speaking like this, and it's fine. But not every character is going to use these. I would say if you have a character in a book that uses them, only one character should be using these.
It's definitely going to like focus in on that person and probably distract. So it needs to be
distracting. So it needs to be a character whose whole personality is already distracting.
Yes. So I don't like this one a ton. I don't use it a lot, but
it's hard. It'd be harder to use without being unnecessarily distracting. So again, that's why it really has to fit a character. Otherwise, I would not suggest.
Yep. Yeah. So it's portmanteau. I also feel like a lot of these are just fun. Like now you know what that's called, right? Like what is brunch? It's a portmanteau.
Like a man's suitcase or something.
That's what I thought when I saw it on there. I was like, what? I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of weird idiom meaning behind that shared word.
Maybe there's some, not the paradox. What's the one before where it's the word with two different meanings?
Oh, double entendre.
Maybe there's a double entendre somewhere with the portmanteau, because I'm pretty sure it also means a man's suitcase.
Yeah, it's something like that.
A wallet or something like that.
Yeah. All right, next one, anastrophe. And this is when the order of the typical parts of speech are exchanged. Yoda is the best example of this. You I love. Go there we must, stuff like that. It's also used a lot in poetry just because it's easier to rhyme certain words that might not be at the last part of the sentence. And another common one is he spoke of times past. Normally you would say past times. but you can say times past or time past. This one, again, this one's going to make it feel like poetry. So you better be making a poetic point if you use this one, I think.
I agree. I think almost always best to avoid using this.
Yeah. And it's going to sound really deep. So if you are using it, you better make sure the point is actually deep and not something like that's everyone believes or everyone says or that it has been said before, because then it'll just sound like
justified. I think I like this the least out of everything we've talked about today. Like this one.
It's tough to do well. I mean, again, Yoda works
but here's the thing is, now that we all know Yoda, this character who speaks this way so iconically, it's going to be impossible to read a character speaking like this and not go, oh, it's Yoda. So like, it's so, at least for our current generation still, it is so iconic. It is so easily identifiable. You can't use it in dialogue without sounding like Yoda. People are going to think about Yoda. You could use it in poetry because that's the way poetry is, and we accept that. Can you use it in prose? Maybe if the rest of the prose is very, very flowery and very elevated language.
Yeah, I think that's the trick. If you're following that.
If you're following it, you might be able to get away with it. But most people do not write in prose that is that flowery or elevated anymore. The people who would write that are out there writing poetry. So
true. So this one's kind of iffy. I mean, it could certainly be part of your style. And if it is, go for it. But you have to keep it up. It's got to fit in with everything. You can't just use it randomly in an otherwise more simple style.
Strong agree.
That's an astrophy, right? Yes, I already turned the page. Okay, we have 3 more. We can do this. The next one is assonance and consonants.
I love it.
Yeah, which is the repetition of vowel sounds or consonant sounds. Assonance is vowels, consonants is consonant sounds in a sentence. It's like alliteration, but it can be anywhere in the word. It doesn't have to be at the beginning of the word. So I feel like this one, if you are reading through a paragraph or something and something about it just feels off, you're probably accidentally using too much or not using enough of these. And so just kind of pay attention really to the specific vowels in that sentence. Do you have a lot of O's? Maybe take some out, even if that means changing your word choice, because too much assonance and consonants is going to sound like poetry. And if you're not going for poetry, then that's going to be awkward. But no assonance and consonants makes everything sound too disjointed. So you want a little bit of it, but not too much.
It's a flow thing. It's a flow thing again, where the only way I feel like to get really good at this is to write a lot and to read a lot. Because this is something that you tend to pick up by ear. This is not something that, I mean, we can tell you what it is and they can tell us what it is in school, but teaching us how to actually use it and recognize it and know how much is too much or how much isn't enough is, I mean, almost impossible. This is just something you have to pick up. Something that you totally feel your way through. That's really almost all you can say about it. It's very important to your flow. But, and it's probably one of the biggest issues with amateur writing, not in like a mean way, but like as an editor with the writers who I can tell are new writers. It's one of like the biggest problems because it's hard because it's not like they're being technically incorrect.
Right.
But without the correct balance of assonance and consonants in like even just a given paragraph, it feels so disjointed and it does feel unprofessional. So again, if you're writing just for fun, maybe that doesn't really matter to you. But if you're writing because you want people to read it, or you're writing because you want to be published, then the flow is something that you should care about. But the only way to get good at it is to just keep doing what you're doing and also keep reading other people's works as well.
Yep. And this is why purposefully switching up your word choice can be really useful. I know we kind of make fun of it that, you know, when you're line editing, you'll change a word and then you'll just change it back and then you'll change it again. Doing that can be really helpful though, because you can start to see, okay, this word really does work here better. And why is that? Is it because it starts with a C and there are no other C's in the sentence? And so it provides some variety. Is it because it starts with a C and therefore it feels like it matches the rest of the sentence because there are a lot of C's?
That's
it's going to depend
what the process is.
Yes. And so let yourself exchange some word choice out every now and then. It's not a waste of time. It feels like a waste of time, but it's not. You're learning.
This is how you do it. And we still do it. You'll never stop doing it. But if you see yourself doing that, that's what you're doing. You're practicing balancing assonance and consonants. If you're like, this word's not technically incorrect, but it's not quite right, that's probably why. And you're already doing it without knowing that you're doing it. So good on you to keep doing that.
Yeah. And it's really hard to identify, both because it's not at the beginning of words necessarily, but also because especially vowel sounds in English, different combinations of vowels make different sounds. So you can't even do it visually totally. You have to read it through. So like go slow over the road is assonance because it has those long O sounds in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know that reading through it quickly or speaking it, you would even notice that if I just said it as a normal statement, because it's not like all of the words begin with O. And even in alliteration, it doesn't have to make the same O sound. In consonants and assonants, that combination does.
Yeah. You could say he was not going fast across the road. That doesn't sound as good.
Right.
So
it sounds less poetic, I guess. And not that you have to be going for poetic, you just have to be going for the flow of the thing. And again, you're going to have rhythm too. Like some people write in iambic pentameter, even if it's not poetry, they just have a certain rhythm to the way that their words and their sentences are structured. So you can't even necessarily copy someone else's like ratio of certain consonants and vowels, because you might write different rhythmically, you know? So it's definitely something you have to feel your way through, which sucks because we can't really give you any strong advice about how to take note of it. It's just you have to try it
with word choice and go by ear. If it sounds more right with one word than another, that's probably what's happening.
Exactly.
So it just it's more something that you find yourself doing than it is something that you try to put into practice. We do all want to put it into practice, but it's just something that you kind of naturally do at some point.
Yeah, exactly. You probably speak in it better than you write in it.
Oh yeah,
because you're used to speaking more, obviously. So
yep.
So just try things out, that one. The next one is rhetorical fragment, which is a sentence fragment using only a partial sentence, the predicate or the subject. Usually this is where the sentence beforehand or the sentence after will actually complete the technical sentence, but you put a period there instead of a comma or some other kind of punctuation. This is used for emphasis, and it can avoid repetition sometimes, which can be nice. I like it too. I use this one a lot as well. But I do think sometimes if you're not careful, you end up not completing the thought. So you do need to make sure that when you are using it, if you have a sentence fragment, say to yourself, okay, what is the beginning or end of this statement? If you can't find it, you need to add something or take it out. But if it is there, it's just earlier in the paragraph, or it's earlier in, I don't know, it could even be the previous paragraph or whatever. If you know the subject you're on, it's okay to just have action or to just have a subject. So just make sure that the thought is getting completed somewhere, even if it's not in the same sentence.
Yeah. And I think the two primary purposes for this are for flow and or impact, because it increases emphasis, and then it also can like help flow. If you've got like a lot of like longer sentences or like more like sentences that go smoother and you want to chop things up a little bit more, great way to do it. It just like keeps the flow lively and like breathing. And then it also increases emphasis for whatever that thought is that you're coming back to, or that you're starting but not quite finishing, or whatever it is. So very useful, but very much one that you do need to know the rule to begin with. Like Karissa said, like if this is one where you don't know how to use it, I do not recommend using it. If you know what you're doing, you know how to use it, it can be so useful. But when used incorrectly or on accident, it typically does not land very well. It typically looks like you're a new writer who doesn't know what they're doing, which is not.
And it makes the thoughts feel like they're going nowhere.
Writers, I'm not.
Yeah,
it's just,
you have to learn.
Anyone, you have to learn. Anything that you start with, you're not great at. And no one has ever done learning either. So like a lot of the stuff I'm not great at. A lot of these, the ones that I haven't said as much about, are ones that I don't use because I don't really understand.
Right.
So everyone's learning, but that's one that I notice a lot, because we all want to do it because we tend to think that way. And we tend to like think in fragments and speak in fragments. So it's natural. But we understand ourselves a lot more than people are going to understand us and on the page and our thought process. So just something to be careful using.
Yep. And like I said, it can be you can have a paragraph that is a sentence fragment as long as something before or after is completing the thought.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of freedom with this one. You just need to make sure that it is completed and it's at some point.
Yeah, it's true.
Yep. All right. Now we have the last one, which is euphemism and innuendo, which I combined into one. Yeah. Euphemism is a replacement for a taboo or impolite thing with delicate phrasing. Really common one of this is going to be they're sleeping
That's
together.
What she said. Oh, okay.
Or that one. Yeah.
Yes, that's
that one too.
Yours is better.
Yeah, mine's a little more common. That one's a little more of a
yeah.
joke one,
It
but
is, yeah.
people use this just like straight up in speech as a euphemism, obviously for sex. Yes. A bun in the oven is a euphemism for being pregnant. So that kind of stuff.
Her it essentially time of the month is a euphemism for
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's usually used to soften, downplay, or mask a situation. So it's, you know, the kind of thing you could say around a child and you're not concerned that they're going to understand what you're talking about, even though you're using real words.
Yeah.
And it's therefore going to be used to talk about things that are, you know, people don't usually want to talk about.
Like
they're uncomfortable.
Like, she passed away.
Yes, that is also another euphemism. Yep. Or the dog went to the farm or something like that you tell children. So yeah, it doesn't have to be sexual. I think a lot of times it is sexual, but it can also be about death or about pregnancy or bodily functions that people just don't want to touch on.
Either taboo or not polite for all audiences, or it's just kind of a touchy subject. I think there's probably a lot of political euphemisms as well.
Yes.
Anything that you would want to be material, you'd want to be careful with in a conversation. This stuff that we have euphemisms for. You can make up your own for world building, which is, I assume, what you're going to say.
Yeah, I wasn't, but that is absolutely something I would say. But then innuendo, I think people mix up or combine euphemism and innuendo. So innuendo is an indirect or subtle observation to avoid direct responsibility for a statement. Again, it's usually about taboo subjects in some way. One is they've been spending a lot of time together alone, if you know what I mean. Right. So that's more of an innuendo it's,
I've never known the difference.
Yeah. So if you use some kind of a statement like, if you know what I mean, or you know, like just something like that,
or inferring. It's like a combination of implying and inferring. Sort of.
You're saying like you know what I'm talking about. People are like, I guess,
you know what I'm saying.
Another one is she got some extra help on the test, right? Meaning she cheated or had the answers.
Yes.
So it's essentially socially acceptable gossip. Right. You can talk about people because you're not really, you're not really saying anything about them, but you're implying enough that you're technically talking about them.
Southerners are so good at this. Good at this.
It's true. Different cultures definitely, or like regions definitely have variations on how often they use this. I definitely think Southerners are good at innuendos
and euphemisms, because we don't
probably
down here. It's all about etiquette, y'all. And so you can talk about
you don't say impolite
things.
Talk
about. No, you don't say the impolite things. You can talk about the impolite things, but you don't ever say the impolite things. You find a different way to say it. Yeah.
So that's, you know, something to keep in mind. I think euphemisms and innuendo are great to use even in prose, because first of all, if you're writing in something like YA or middle grade, maybe this is less important, or maybe it is important in YA, where if you phrase something delicately enough, you're not like approaching too mature of subject matter for the younger readers, but the older readers can still understand what you're talking about. So something like, you know, they've been spending a lot of time together, if you know what I mean, or if two people come out of a bedroom in the morning together. I don't know that a 13-year-old is necessarily going to get that, but a 17-year-old definitely is. And depending on the maturity level.
Yeah. Maybe we can have dinner and breakfast, you know, which is, yes, we all know what that means, but a kid probably wouldn't get that.
Right.
They'd be like, cool, I'm hungry.
Yeah. So it can be a way to kind of mask certain things in your story if you do want maybe slightly younger readers to still be able to connect with it and not technically be like talking directly about it to them. Where if it's just important for some reason for us to know that these characters are like in a relationship, maybe you imply more than you say. And that can be really useful there.
It's almost like a tasteful cutaway, but just for language. Yeah,
exactly. And it can avoid, I think, so a big discussion now, and we're not going to get into it right now, but are trigger warnings and whether or not books should have trigger warnings. The more euphemisms and innuendos you use, the fewer trigger warnings you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're not really talking about it.
Yeah, we really briefly on TPBC, I think we implied something about assault in one of the books we were talking about. But because we really just implied it and we used innuendos to discuss it, I didn't end up, I debated, I was like, should I put a trigger warning? And then I was like, I really don't think I need to, because we were so barely touched the topic. Because
you just talk around it.
Yeah, we just talk around it, which is, I know some people are like, be direct. And I'm like, yes, but there's a reason that we use innuendo, which is because sometimes to get the point across, you don't want someone to be so uncomfortable that they miss, again, the forest for the trees. So if you can make people comfortable while you're having a discussion, you all know what you're talking about, that can be really useful. And some people are more comfortable with some things and other things that they're not. So I
appreciate euphemisms and innuendos.
I also very much appreciate. I don't know. I don't think it's just the Southern side of me. I think it's also just my personality. I think
I'm not Southern, and I agree.
Exactly. So. I think they're classier oftentimes, but I think also they're just they're more polite, they're more discreet, they're more respectful is largely what it is. They feel more respectful. So you could also know that a character who is more respectful is probably going to use innuendos and euphemisms, even if they're like not being like gossipy about it, like they're just probably going to. It's very much a cultural thing, it's very much a personality thing. So great narration for sensitive stuff, and also great to know, is this a character who would use these or not?
Yep, absolutely. They can also be funny. So that's also a lot of these really can be funny if you're doing them right. And that's all. I think humor is always good. Yeah. Or almost always
typically used as jokes. Because like sometimes you'll have a funny character that'll use it just to be funny, not because they're in any way a discreet person.
Right.
Javi doesn't actually use any of these at all, even to be funny.
He's more direct.
He's extremely direct. He's not a character you would ever see using these even as a joke. No. However, would I use them as a joke? Yes. And also because I think that it's more my personality, but also I'll use it as a joke because it's funny. And I like to tiptoe right up to the edge of impropriety, which is what these are excellent for.
Yes. Yeah. So they're fun. I think they're good. You can use them to talk about things that maybe people don't want to talk about, but need to talk about. And so you don't alienate those people, but you still are able to talk about things. So I like them. And that's all the ones I had. So did you have any you want to talk about?
No, that's all. I trust you to come up with the literary devices, because I honestly don't even know all of them. Then you say them and I'm like, oh yeah, that. I just didn't know what we call it.
Right. I mean, I didn't know what they were called before I researched for this, but I'm definitely going to try to memorize them and use them in conversation now to make myself sound smart. I'll probably
forget all of the words that we discussed, but I will remember all of the devices. So
yes, and that's the important part. Just knowing, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but kind of knowing that something is an accepted literary style, I feel like just gives you more confidence doing it. It does. That other authors have done it and it has worked and it is effective. So
I think so. A lot of it's in confidence. Break the rules. If you're going to break them confidently. It's like when you have a character like a Mercutio type. It's not that he's correct. He's very wrong, but he's very confident. And so he can get away with a lot. And it's the same with writing. You can break a lot of rules if you do them confidently. You can do what you want if you do it confidently. But if there's any uncertainty, you will know. Like I was working on my book and I was like, you know what? There's this like very nagging question that I keep having that keeps kind of coming up. And I'm like, it's not even that important. But this question I have about this one part of the book is making me sound not confident. I realized every time I address it in the book, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to figure this out because it's undermining my confidence in this one area. And it's not even an important thing. It just, there's this one aspect. If I don't figure it out for myself, I feel like my writing's not going to sound confident. So know thyself.
No, that's the conclusion here. Know thyself.
Know thyself. know thy limits.
Yeah. That's all the literary devices I have. I love them. I think they're great. I do think they're debatable. Well. They depend on situation, but they are fun.
I think so too. Well, do you want to give us a writing update?
Yeah, I mean, it's not super long or anything. I just have that short story that I sent Ash. And I'm doing an edit on it right now. And I don't know why I do this to myself. I write in past tense. I'm a past tense writer. For some reason, in short stories, I write in present tense, and it throws me. And I guess you guys can steal this. It's not my thing, but you don't know what the story is about anyway. But I wrote it in second person, which I'm so excited about because I feel like people don't do that a lot. I think I did it pretty well. And so I really love it. That was easier for me than writing in present tense.
I could tell when I was reading it. I was like, she's struggling with the past tense thing.
I'm going through it and I'm like, gosh, there's another stupid ED. I have to change it to an ES. So I I'm on an edit right now that is purely just making sure everything is in present tense, because you can't even do a search for ed because there are verbs that in past tense that are not, they don't have D's in them. That's not, there's no D there. But anyway, so I'm just doing a full edit for that. And then I'm going to do another edit tomorrow. And then I'm going to try to send it in. I don't know. I would like to send it in before the 30th because I like to be ahead of schedule, but I could send it the 30th if I wanted to, which would be today, the day you guys are listening to this, probably at the earliest. I'm really excited about it. I think it's good.
It's really good. It's so good.
Thank you.
And it was shocking.
I know.
The more I read, the more I was like getting closer and closer to my computer. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening now? And then at the end, I was like, no.
I know. It's so that event at the end where essentially something violent happens. I looked up the like rules of the contest, and it says you can't have gratuitous violence. I'm like, I don't think that's gratuitous. Gratuitous is like large in number and pointless to the story, right?
Yeah. Gratuitous means there's no purpose for it. Like there's no point of it.
And like it's a really emotional moment. So I feel like it definitely has purpose, and it's one.
I don't think it's gratuitous.
Yeah. Okay. I feel confident. And it's like at the judge's discretion. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't feel like it's gratuitous. So I'm going to submit it.
It's good. Regardless, there's so many weird like rules and stuff they consider in contests. So if you ever like, I wrote this really great story and it didn't win anything, it's probably has very little to do with you.
That's
and
true.
A lot more to do with the rules the judges have to follow.
Yeah. And I think they give themselves kind of some outs. So they phrase things really vaguely, and they really only use it if you are really outside the box and they need a reason to say no.
Yeah.
So
it's true. It's very true.
Yep. Yeah. But that's basically what I've been doing, and I'm excited about it. What about you?
I'm editing. Still editing. I have like 200 pages left to edit, which it was like 300 pages, I think, last time I gave a page update. So I'm making progress. It's just slow. Every day I think we're going to work on it, I get caught up doing other things. Like today I was like, ooh, I'm going to use my lunch break. No, I didn't. I went and got food and I tried on my mermaid tail. And then I had also, when I had time between chores and when I started work this morning, I was like, no, I'm going to edit now. Instead, I changed my car insurance policy and I replied to an email I've needed to reply to for like 2 weeks. So like, it's hard because I'm like, it's stuff that has to happen. Like I have to be. I have to reply to this email eventually, and I have to like change my car insurance policy. I mean, I guess I don't have to, but I'm saving like $100 a month, which is really nice. So it felt necessary. Yeah. So those are my excuses for this week. Really, writing corner for Ash is this is my excuses this week.
Why didn't I write this week?
Why didn't I write? Well, I did edit some. I just, since last week I have, but I was like, I keep thinking I'm going to have a day where I can like really focus down on my editing, and then stuff keeps getting in the way. Almost fell off my yoga ball, but I'm so upset about it. Oh, I almost fell off the other way. I gotta stop like dramatically shaking my head.
Don't flail.
Oh, that's really hard. I'll just sit still. It's hard.
The flailing is my passion.
It is my passion. I could go on a diatribe about it.
Yes.
But yeah, so editing, I'm still editing.
Cool.
I'm jealous you got to write a short story because I'm like, I want to write a short story. I want to like just write something, but I have to get through this edit, and I'm so close, and then I can query it. So
yeah,
I just need like maybe this weekend, we'll see. Like I really just need like a solid like 2 days straight, and it would be done. And it would be great. But I could probably even have the query letter written if I had like a solid 2 days. Maybe I'll get really sick and I'll but then I'm gonna want to rest because I'm gonna be sick. I don't know. I think I could push through at this point. I need the time. So anyways, that's my update. Sorry guys.
Cool.
I know I'm a disappointment to you all, but
no, editing is important. So
it is. It's taking me a lot of time because I keep getting distracted with other things that need to be done. So today I also thought, okay, I'm gonna make the boys do the chores. So I like wrote a list of the chores that had to get done today on the chalkboard in the kitchen. And I was like, guys, I don't care who does it. Just these need to happen today. And because I was trying to exactly. I was trying to make room in my day for editing and I still didn't have any. So oh well.
Annoying.
Yeah. But that's my update. So anything else?
No.
All right. Well, that was our last episode in our 3-part literary devices series. So if you guys have been bored out of your minds, you will have something to look forward to next episode. If you guys have been enjoying this, I'm sorry to say we're done with this series for now. Not to say that there might not be another surprise renewal. Who knows? There are many more literary devices than I can name off. Karissa would love it.
I limited myself to 3 for those of you that do not love this.
For those of you who don't love literary devices. So I don't know what we're going to do next episode yet. I just remembered what my idea was before. I think I was thinking about writer's block. But have we done that before? We might have done that before.
But we could do a follow-up, or I mean,
a part 2 of writer's block. I don't know. Here's what do you guys want is the real question. If you guys have a suggestion, there's something that you guys want us to talk about on the pod. We want to talk about what you want to talk about. Plus, like, the ideas just always help. And so if you guys want to reach out to us, you can email us at contact@storysirenstudio.com, or you can contact us on social media via DM. We are the Scripturient Society. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. If you guys want to support the pod, you can do that at storysirenstudio.com. We've got a bunch of really cool merch. That's our production company, by the way. And then tune into That Pretentious Book Club this next week for Phantom of the Opera, in which Karissa is going to be there. I'm going to be there. And my co-host at TPPC Spoons is going to be there. And it's going to be great fun. It's going to be delightful. So until next week, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.